Hey everyone, we all want to teach values that, actually stick with our students, right? So today we're going to unpack a really powerful method to get character education off the textbook page and into their real everyday lives.
And let's be honest, that's the big question, isn't it? It's one thing to talk about integrity or empathy or responsibility, but it is a whole other thing to see our students actually internalize those values and use them. So how do we close that gap?
Well, the answer is a pretty fundamental shift in how we approach this. We have to move away from just lecturing about what it means to be a good person, and instead create an environment where students can actively practice and live out those principles for themselves.
Okay, let's get into it. The tool for making this shift is project-based learning, or PBL. So what is it? At its heart, PBL is all about giving students a real, complex problem to solve over a period of time. They don't just learn about a topic, they investigate it, create something, and then present a solution.
And this is why PBL is such a game changer for teaching values. It's not some hypothetical what-if scenario. Students have to apply things like cooperation and responsibility to solve actual problems. They're not just responsible for the final product, but for how they work together and grow. They get to truly own the entire process.
All right, so that sounds great, but how do you actually do this in your classroom? Let's walk through a clear 6-step blueprint that really breaks it all down, starting with how you set the stage for a great project.
The setup is absolutely everything. First, you frame the whole project around a really compelling, real-world question. Something like, how can we make our school a kinder place? Then you hand the reins over to the students. They brainstorm, they plan, they figure out who's doing what, and finally, they just get to work, putting their plan into action, and teamwork isn't just encouraged, it's totally essential for them to succeed.
Now for the follow-through, which is just as crucial. As the students are working, they need to be constantly reflecting on their actions, what's working, what isn't, and which values are really being put to the test. Then, they share their work with a real audience, which raises the stakes. And finally, you evaluate not just the final outcome, but the whole process, the behaviors, the collaboration, the character they showed along the way.
So we've got the framework, but what does this actually look like in a real classroom? It's one thing to talk theory. Let's get practical and take an abstract concept and see how PBL brings it to life.
Let's use empathy as our example. It's a huge one, right? But it can be notoriously difficult to teach. How do you make that idea of walking in someone else's shoes a concrete, actionable lesson?
In a PBL setting, empathy isn't a vocabulary word, it's an action verb. It looks like older students tutoring younger ones because they recognize their struggles and want to help them succeed. It looks like a student-led food drive that started from a genuine desire to help families in their own community. It's all about taking that feeling and turning it into something real and impactful.
Let's get even more specific. Imagine the driving question is, how can our school promote kindness and respect? A fantastic project that could come out of this is a student-organized Kindness Week. And this just brilliantly illustrates the whole PBL cycle. The students don't just participate, they create it. They're the ones planning the events, from compliment boards to campus cleanups. They assign the roles, holding each other accountable. And then they run the whole show, experiencing firsthand the challenges and the rewards of bringing a positive vision to life.
And this brings us to a super important element, reflection. This is where the deepest learning really happens. Posing a question like the one you see here forces students to move beyond the logistics and think critically about their own behavior. Did they act with integrity when nobody was watching? Did they truly cooperate when there was a disagreement?
Now, for any of this to work, our role as educators has to change pretty dramatically. We're no longer the sage on the stage who just gives out all the knowledge. Our role becomes much more dynamic.
Your role really transforms. You become a facilitator, helping to guide the planning process. You act as a coach, nudging students toward making ethical choices. You're an observer, watching how values are applied in real time. And maybe most importantly, you become a connector, helping them see how this project applies to their lives outside of school.
So the crucial point is this. Project-based learning isn't just another teaching trend. It's a method that takes these big, abstract principles like honesty, respect, and empathy and makes them tangible. It turns them into observable behaviors and meaningful actions that students can see, feel, and practice.
And that leaves us with one last thought.
By empowering our students to tackle real challenges, we're not just teaching them about values, we're giving them the chance to become responsible, empathetic, and proactive citizens. So the question for you is, what real-world problem will your students solve first?